What are the new features in Archicad 25? There aren't a whole lot of new features, but just enough to keep it interesting and make it worth the upgrade. Because we are jumping straight from version 22 to 25, you won't have seen the new features that appeared in versions 23 and 24. I've made separate videos for those that'll be on the same YouTube channel as this one here, so watch those videos for the new features in 23 and 24, as well as this one for the new features in 25. The first thing I'll do is to go into the help menu and pull up the Archicad reference guide. In there you'll see a section for all the new features. So if I go into here to say new features, these are all the new features which I'll go through and show you what they are. The first thing new with 25 is they want you to authenticate the license now, which means you have to create a Graphisoft ID. You'll either be prompted to do this when you install Archicad or the first time that you start Archicad up. It's quite simple. Use your work email address to create the ID and create a new password. Don't use your work password for obvious reasons. Create a new password, make sure you can remember it. You sign in and that will create your Graphisoft ID. When you've created your Graphisoft ID, you may be asked to join the company. If you do, make sure that you join JWH Group Party Limited or pty.ltd. That is the company default name, and all of our licenses are linked to that particular company name. If you're asked to link to a particular license, then go ahead and link to the license that you have on your silver key. For those of you at RBWA that don't have a personal USB key, then we need to use the network license, so probably contact me if we get to that stage. Once you create your Graphisoft ID and you've logged into the company group, it will probably email me a message to say that you want to join the group, and I need to confirm that, so I will do that. If you join the company group and it doesn't send me an email for authentication, then I can do that manually by going into the company details and sending you an invitation, so long as you log in with your company email address. If you have troubles with the Graphisoft ID or starting Archicad up when we get it going, then just let me know and I can go through and sort that out on the spot. So back to our new features. The next thing here is there's a couple of new commands that will help us to navigate in the model. Basically what it is there's now a new command to say select on floor plan. So if you're in 3D, you can select any element, or even in sections and elevations actually, you can select any element, and you can now right mouse click and say select on floor plan, and it will actually highlight that selected element on the floor plan and select it. The same goes from floor plan, we can select in 3D, and once in 3D we can hide a selection. So if I look at Archicad just quickly, you can see here I'm in the floor plan. If I select this vanity unit, I can select that now and show that in 3D, which we always could, but now I can actually show the 3D model and have this selected in 3D. The only trick is that if you're jumping from floor plan to 3D or 3D to floor plan, you need to make sure that the corresponding layer is on as well. So if I select that vanity unit, right click and say select in 3D, you can see that it's selected in 3D, but because I've got the entire model open here, it's selected it, but it's showing the entire model, not just that selected element. Of course, now that that's selected, I can just right click and say show selection in 3D, and it will take me to just that vanity basin. If I say show all, back to my model, I can also do things like I can select maybe this roof here, and so from 3D I can now select this and say select and show on floor plan, and it will go off, and again, so long as the correct layers are turned on, it will now select that roof in floor plan. So it's a nice little way of jumping around from one view to another and keeping the elements selected. Of course you can do it with multiple elements as well. The other thing you can also do is we can right click on this and I can say hide selection. It's not like hiding the layer, it's only going to hide what you've selected, so it's only hiding that one piece of roof. I can select whatever I like and say hide selection. Again, you can do it with multiple elements. It's still there, of course, so I haven't deleted it, it's just hidden. But I haven't hidden the whole roof layer, I've just hidden those selected elements. At any time I can go in here and say show all and bring them back. So they're not gone, they're not deleted. So continuing on in our new features, the wall opening object, a new tool that was introduced in version 24, was only previously rectangular openings and circular openings. Now we have the option of irregular polygon openings. If, for example, I just quickly draw a slab down the bottom here, I can create an opening. I can create a rectangular opening, I can create a circular opening, now I can create a polygon opening. You can see with the rectangular and the circular it has the sizes, with a polygon it has no sizes. So I can create a polygon, single lines, in any shape, move that out of the way, in any shape that I want, in that slab. I can select that slab, show that in 3D. So there's my slab in 3D. I can now select that polygon hole, and it's just like any other polygon. I can select its nodes now, and I can move these nodes around. I can edit the edge, and I can curve the edge. I can move the edge, add nodes to the edge, do whatever I like to it, and that is a polygon opening. I can also now select the opening thickness. And this is the great thing about openings, I can now adjust the height of that thickness, so I can pull that up and say to about there, so I can make a nice little niche, if you like, in that slab. You can do this, of course, in slabs, walls, meshes, beams. We can add openings to them, and you can manipulate their size and depth, so now we can have polygon openings. So let's go back into our documentation. Stair improvements, there's a couple of stair improvements which I won't worry about explaining them. Basically new construction method to work out the way that it calculates the length of the treads when it goes around winders and things like that. Just be aware that it's there, and if we need to use it, it's available. So it just adjusts the spaces of the winders slightly differently. Param-O is a new feature, was introduced in 24. It basically is a way of creating parametric objects. It's what they call a node-based system. So you basically have a choice of all these nodes and commands on the left-hand side, and we can drag and drop those into the window here, and we can link them together to say that this pen variable affects the pen color. The surface variable affects the surface color of this block that we've just placed. So I won't explain how it all works, but if anyone is interested, I can maybe show you a little bit about it. It's okay, it's not great. GDL is much more powerful, but it just saves you actually knowing GDL. You don't have to actually script it. When you save this, it will create a GDL object that will be parametric, and you'll be able to control it with these variables that you have created. So again, if you're interested, let me know and we can maybe go through it, but it's not super valuable, I don't think, for general use. New in 24 again, I think, maybe it came in 23, I'm not sure, is structural analytical models. It's something we don't need to worry about. It's to do with organising how the loading goes through the elements, whether there's a continuous load across the entire element, or it's a single point load and things like that, or it's a surface load. It's not something we need to worry about because we're not getting into structural analysis, but the idea is this is part of the model that we can define and then export that out to structural software, so the engineers can actually then take this further and do whatever it is they need to do to calculate the loads and things like that. Again, as I say, we're not going to worry about it, so I'll just skip over this section here till we get to this bit here, which is our survey point. Again, something we probably won't use. we have the north direction that we can put in, and we can always nominate our longitude and latitude and position exactly so that we get the proper sun calculations for shadows. But together with that, there's now what they call a survey point. The survey point is an extra point that we can place on the plan. It can be located anywhere on the plan. It can even be miles away from the plan, but it gives basically a 0, 0 coordinate. It's more for when we export drawings to other software, so that they've got a position to calculate, again, engineers and surveyors and things like that, so that they've got a reference point of where the building is in relation to this north point. It's all there in the system, but again, I don't think it's anything we need to worry about. If we need the survey point, it's all here in the work environment. It's set up for us to use. Basically, you just click on this and say, look, that's where I want my survey point. It can be moved wherever you like. It can be rotated. It's linked to the north point in the fact that it will show the north direction, but it's actually a position as well. So again, we've got a reference point to a known datum, if you like. But as I say, it's probably not something we need to worry about. That button simply turns it on and off. And there's options here where we can rotate the survey point and show the survey point coordinates. The RFA and RVT exchange, that's the Revit files. Quite often we can get objects from, say, places like Chroma, which will be in different file 3D formats, Revit being one of them, RVT files. Before, in previous versions, we've had an add-on that allows us to import those Revit files. That add-on is now something we don't need to install as an extra. It's built into Archicad, so the process is the same. If we need to do that, then basically you go into libraries and objects and we can import a Revit file as a GDL object. Be aware that they can be very big files. They can have many polygons and will slow things down, and they don't always look exactly as we want them to look, so there might be further editing that you need to do to those objects. You might need to even convert them into a morph and edit them to simplify them a little bit. Documentation wise, there's a new part to do with schedules, in that we can now add some extra calculation rules for openings and things like that. So what would happen is, before, when we did schedules for areas of components, it would only calculate the net area, and the net area includes the openings, so it would always subtract the openings from the slab or the wall. Now we've got the choice of doing what they call gross and conditional. Gross areas is the entire wall, regardless, it ignores the openings, so it will only give us the gross area of the entire element. Conditional will allow us to subtract only certain openings, and in here we can set the conditional requirements for those openings. So the opening has to be bigger than a certain area. Don't include openings less than 0.5 square metres, or don't include openings if their depth is less than 50 mil for like a wall recess and things like that. So we can set up these conditional rules, so the conditional will only calculate those that meet the requirements for those rules, and of course we still have the net area where we can calculate the areas with all openings deducted. So we've now got no openings, conditional openings, and all openings. Graphic overrides, there's new options for the background fills for graphic overrides. Probably something we don't use an awful lot of, but we might make more of in the future. So with your graphic overrides, which is down here, you have your graphic overrides, and you can choose whichever ones you happen to be using, BCA shaded overhang or drafting, or sometimes there's one here that says zone colours. Transparent, probably the ones we use most often for our plans. But with any of these come rules. I've got one here that says to create all cover fills transparent. That's a standard rule that's part of Archicad. If we go in to edit those rules, what you'll find now is it's all the same as it was before, but now with the background fill pen and the surface pen, there's an option for what they call RGB colours, red, green, blue colours. So we can choose the pen colour, and we can actually choose the actual pen. So we've got our 255 pens and our few special pens that we've got down here, but now we've got what they call RGB color, red, green, blue, and if I check that, it's not actual pens, it's where we can decide exactly what color. So we can choose any color. You can use the scales here to create the colors you want. So any value from 0 to 255. 000 is white, 255, 255, 255 is black. Anything in between is a color that you can pick. This just increases the intensity, so that's obviously more white and that's obviously more black. So you can set up any color that you like in here and just simply say OK and add that color to your drafting fills, surface fills and cut fills, just for the background pen. Doesn't affect the foreground pen. The foreground pen still only has the standard pen colors. So the actual hatch lines can only have standard pen colors, but the background of a fill can now have these RGBs. And it's the same with the surface colors. We can override with another surface, so I can override with any surface that we've got here in the surface list, or I can say no, I don't want to use a surface, I want to use just an RGB color. So we can easily do that. The thing with the surface RGB colors is it's just a color and that's it. With the surface, you can override with a surface, and that surface can have a hatch pattern. So like here with the mortar, it's got the dotted hatch. That's exactly what you'll see. You'll see a coloured fill or a coloured surface with a dotted hatch. Whereas with the RGB, it's just a colour, there's no hatching styles. So that's our graphic overrides for the surface backgrounds. There's a new MEP label. We don't really use MEP elements, things like ducting and cold water plumbing, hot water plumbing, that sort of stuff, pipes. But if we were to use these MEP elements, there's a new label that can do a few new things with regards to showing the actual type of service that it is and the sizing of it and things like that. Again, I won't worry about it because we don't use it that much. One that you will make use of, I'm sure, is this one here. It's a new visualization method in the sections and elevations, and it allows us to actually use the OpenGL materials like we see in 3D. So if I have a look in here and I go and open up a external elevation, generally speaking your elevation will come up something like this. If I use maybe the external elevation layers as well, that'll make it complete. Generally speaking, for a working drawing we want a simple line style elevation with just hatch patterns for various textures and things that we've got on here. But in your elevation settings, so if I go into here and go into elevation settings, what you've got is under the model appearance for uncut elements, this is what we would normally have. We would normally have the uniform pen color, to say that we want a uniform pen color, and we want a transparent pen. So we're using the transparent pen here as a background. That gives us our fills with the hatch patterns because we're still saying to show the cover fill or the hatch pattern. They've changed this to surface cover fill. That used to say vectorial fill before. That used to be just a vectorial fill. All it means is surface cover fill is the surface material that you've got on that element. It will show the hatch pattern for it. So that's what we're seeing here with a blank background. Of course we can change this and say I want the surface colour fill, non-shaded in this case, and that gives us our nice shaded colours. Now these materials happen to be grey, but they could be any colour you like. And you can see all it is it's just a simple colour with the hatch patterns. But if I go back into the elevation settings, what we've got now is a new option. So I can choose to say I want the surface texture fill. And if I choose the surface texture fill, what we'll see is the actual texture as we do in 3D. You'll still get the hatch if we want to. We can turn that off, of course, if we don't want to. So we can see the hatch, but we're actually getting the actual wood grain texture or the render texture or the brick textures that are shown in the 3D model. So as I say, if we want to, we can turn the hatch pattern off still. in which case we'll no longer have the dots for the render. The lines will be gone, but the actual texture that's used in this surface material has got the weatherboard lines in it, or the bricks, or whatever it is that we've got. So you can see here the roof's got the colour bond corrugations in there. So we can set those, as I say, with the model appearance in here. The two other ones here are the surface colour shaded, or the texture colour shaded. That just brings in the sun orientation. So if the sun's on the back of your house, then the front of the house will be in shadow and these colours will appear much darker. So this will be useful for your presentation elevations. So it's just a new way of doing it. We also have a new feature with fills, so we can actually draw fills with the same textures when it comes to actually drawing a fill. So if I go to the fill tool, what we've got now is the regular drafting fill, whether it's a cut fill or a cover fill. That's all the same as it was before. We can also do a building material. So if I just do a drafting fill or a cover fill, you can see here that's our simple earth pattern. If I do it as a building material, then we get to choose the actual building material that we want to use. So if again I do an earth building material, it looks much the same because that's the way that the building material is set up, is to show the brown colour with the earth hatch, and that's exactly what it's doing, a brown colour with the earth hatch. But if I do it as a surface cover fill, and now I can actually use my surfaces, not the building materials, I can pick an earth type cover fill and it will actually look like earth. It's the actual texture that's being used. So if you need to replace a small section of brickwork with something else, you can do it obviously in 3D and split the wall and change all the materials, or you can cheat and just put a fill over it. But you've now got the option if you want to do, again, the presentation type pictures. If you want to do the presentation type pictures, we can put a textured fill over the top of it. Back to our new features. There's library enhancements. There's a whole bunch of new objects, new cabinet tools. They're not very good. They're not like our cabinets. They don't show the same. But the idea is now they've changed them from the old cabinets. So there's 7 different shapes or styles of cabinets, if you like. And then there's 3 different spatial arrangements. There's a base cabinet, there's a standing cabinet, which is like a tall pantry like this one here. And there's overhead. So there's base, standing and overhead or wall. And the idea is you can mix and match these and snap them all together. They're all modular, but they're not like our cabinets. Each cabinet, you have to put in a cabinet for each basically door panel. So I think you can do a double door panel, but you can't say stretch the cabinet out and have 5 or 6 or 7 cabinet doors. You can either have one door. I think, as I say, there's an option for a double door, and then it basically doesn't stretch over that. The doors just get wider, and you have to actually place individual cabinets for every cabinet carcass, if you like. I've got them in the standard library, so if you want to use them for presentation, feel free, but they're not great for working drawings. There's a lot of other objects, chairs, couches, sofas, beanbags, all that sort of stuff, clothes racks, some new accessories, tables, chairs, even complete dining room. The table and chairs is one unit, one object that's all multipliable, new chairs, chimneys, I guess you can use them as pizza ovens and stuff as well. So all these new objects, they're in the library now, so we can use them if you like. Just be aware they probably don't follow our particular systems as far as there's no layers involved. Obviously you choose a layer, but they're not nominated in layers. And the line appearances and stuff, you won't have as much control as we do with some of our objects. So use them to your own peril. Additional improvements, there's a few nice little changes in 25. Track changes and model compare, we won't worry about that because we don't do anything like that. We're not tracking changes, we're not doing model comparisons. Object settings, elevations and 3D previews. This is quite nice. This is when you go into an object setting. So if I take this vanity and go into the object settings, if I'm in plan and I rotate this, I am rotating the object. Okay, so that's exactly the same as it was before. I'm rotating the object, and if I say OK, the object will physically rotate in plan. Okay. However, now, if I go into elevation or in 3D, quite often you turn around and you say, oh, hang on, I'm seeing the back of the cabinet, I need to see the other side. So you can turn it around in 3D, you can turn it around in elevation, whichever, it doesn't matter. When you say OK, it doesn't rotate anymore, which is great. The line tool is a little bit, it's not different, it's just they've organised it differently. So the lines now come out in groups. So obviously your solid line will be first. You'll then see a group of all your dashed lines. You'll then see a group of all your symbol lines. And they're in alphabetical order, which they weren't before. So if I go to my line tool and I select I'll let go of the object. If I go to the line tool and select the lines, so you can now see here they're in groups, and even better, they're in alphabetical order, which makes it a little bit easier to see what we've got, whereas they weren't before. Anywhere you see what was called the Vectorial hatch, it's now been renamed as a cover fill. So anytime that you would have seen the options to turn on a Vectorial hatch or the Vectorial fill, it's now called a cover fill, because technically that's what it is. It's the cover fill of the element. So they just renamed it. Edit multiple layer combinations. You can now select multiple layer combinations in one go, and if you wanted, say, the site layer to be either turned on and off or to be a different priority number or something like that, you can actually edit all of these in one go. So you select all your layers and you simply just change the layer number, or you turn them on and off. Turn one of them. If it's on, you turn it off. If it's off, you turn it on. And all of the selected layer combinations will update all at the same time, which is maybe a nice thing. Whereas before you used to have to select the layer and individually turn it on for this one, turn it on for this one, turn it on for this one. Section elevation mark distance, so where it used to be called mark distance area, it's now called fade distance elements. So they've just changed the names of a few things. So when we go into the elevation settings and we look at this, so it's now, instead of mark distance area, it's now fade distance elements. So we can set up, it's the same as it was before, in that you can set a distance and everything behind that distance will become a little bit fainter. But the good thing about it is you can now also do the texture or the surface. So either the colour fill or the texture fill as well with the faded distance. And it will just come out as a ghosty, almost foggy, if you like, dimmed surface. Support for Rhino 6 and 7 is not applicable to us. Export building material classifications as IFC classifications. Again, it doesn't, something we're not really worried about. There is a new BIMX desktop viewer. You probably won't notice much difference with it. We don't use Macs, but if you're using a Mac, it now has this native metal graphics instead of OpenGL, because OpenGL is not applicable on Mac anymore. And that's basically it. So they're all the new features. There are a couple of new features coming with future updates. I can't show you them because obviously nothing's documented yet and it's not in the current version that we have, but in a future update there will be a tweak to the schedules where we can do a little bit of manipulating with the actual schedule output, in that currently what happens is when you do things like multiple beams, if you've got, say, 6 3-metre long beams and you schedule the length of those beams, it will actually amalgamate them all together and give you a length of 18 metres. So even though you're saying I've got a 6 by 3 metre beam, it will actually specify the length of those beams as being 18 metres, because it gives a total length. What we will be able to do in future is to manipulate that schedule and say, no, I want to show the individual beam lengths, and so we'll actually say you've got 6 3-metre beams. So it will actually show the lengths as 3 metres, and so you've got 6 of them. And the other new thing that's coming is to do with zones. You'll be able to label a zone. Oddly enough, the label tool is already in Archicad now. It just doesn't apply to a zone. You can't actually connect it to a zone. But what will happen in the future is that we can now label zones. Zones will also show in sections and elevations. Not so much elevations, but they'll show in sections. And what that allows us to do is we can now label our rooms in section. So as in floor plan, we can label the zone, or we currently use a zone stamp to show the room name. We won't use a room stamp anymore, we'll use a room label. And the great thing is, because it's in section, we can now use that same label on the zone in section, so we can actually label our dining rooms and lounge rooms and whatever in sections as well, without having to use a separate object or text to do that. Those two features will be coming in a future update. Exactly when that update is, I don't know. It'll be later, possibly towards Christmas time. It may even be after. They're in beta testing at the moment, so exactly when they'll be released, I don't know. But that's the new features for 25.